And then what project of yours, in any medium, has been most meaningful to you and why?
Let's see. Most meaningful. I think I can say for sure the direction that my poetry has taken. It's oddly like very heavily influenced by the kind of like psychic growths. I don't know how to describe it, but the growth that I've taken in my life, just trying to break generational curses and things like that. Just kind of recognizing that, you know, some of your mindsets or some of your outlooks on life are inherited, but some of them are your own, and trying to figure out like, you know, who you are versus, you know, what everyone has told you to be or told you what's possible. I think my poetry has helped me kind of explore these ideas and kind of break out of those patterns. And so, yeah, it's definitely the direction my poetry has taken.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would you say like a lot of spiritual growth?
A lot of spiritual growth within it, but it really gets hyper-focused sometimes on like very specific things. So, at one mic back in April, it was actually like my birthday weekend, so it was like super meaningful. I actually did a lot of poetry and had essentially a comedic discussion about patriarchal masculinity and the ways that it manifests and how it's shown up in my life, and it kind of helped me explore the relationships I have to like all the father figures in my life and all the mother figures in my life, and really understand how what systems kind of propagate patriarchal masculinity and how it can be broken down. So like it's that kind of, it can get that specific for
yes.
me. So it's spiritual, but also it kind of it's definitely reflecting in like the way that I work through psychology and things like that. So
and so you kind of mentioned like a comedic conversation and getting into stand-up. So what got you into stand-up? Like what made you interested in wanting to do comedy?
I would say the typical thing that gets people into comedy. I was coming out of a real heartbreak. I'd been in a relationship with someone for 3 years. We were living together, and the breakup was really sudden. And I had already had plans on trying my hand at something new in general because I was wanting to write in a different way. But comedy definitely helped me kind of make light of my of my misery in a way that I needed, because the levity that it gave me was just phenomenal, and then the community that it connected me to kind of helped, I guess, place that kind of space left behind in that relationship. I definitely met a lot of good people and got to really connect with the community again. So I think that it just really revived me. I really appreciated my comedic journey.
That's great. And how do you usually like prepare for a stand-up show?
Oh man, because jokes come when they come. So you just gotta catch them and write them down as soon as you can. But eventually you kind of find that there's like a thread that kind of links them all, and that's how you create your set. Really it just comes down to breaking things up into like 1 or 2 minute, like I hate to say bits because it's, you know, sounds cheesy, but that's the language of the industry. If you break it up into 2 or 3 minute bits and you try to kind of have this conversation with an audience and hope that they're interested, or hope that you can be entertaining enough that they will be interested, and then perform. It's really a performance art. You can have a funny joke and it can be incredibly well written, but if you don't get up there and perform it, it will fall flat. So,
and so is it scary for you to like first get into it, or you're more so excited about it to have like this new outlet?
I was definitely excited about it. I'm a performer by nature. I did acting in high school. I was a competitive drama nerd, and I even made it to like state level competitions and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. So I missed performing, and poetry is one of those things where you can perform it, and this is kind of the reason why I got into comedy. I was like, I've been performing poetry for a long time. I want to learn how to perform another written art. And with poetry, you know, you have an audience and they're listening, they're waiting for you to tell them what the feeling of the room is. With comedy, the audience tells you as a performer what the mood of a room is, and you kind of have to read them and adapt, and if they're laughing at something, you can elaborate, but if they're not, you gotta. So it's really about paying attention to your audience and getting to that level. It was a lot of fun.
And then, so going back to poetry, I know you said you've been writing for as long as you can remember, but was there ever like a moment that really got you into it, or even a moment where you're like, this is what I love doing this?
I'd say, and this is true of like any performance art that I've ever pursued, I realized that I really loved my poetry when I wasn't performing it. So during my college years, I definitely was like hyper focused on like work and school. And then I also had a ton of extracurriculars that were not, they were creative for sure, but they were definitely more business based. And I would be just jealous of people who were like, oh yeah, I went to this open mic, or I did this. And I'm like, I do those things. I'm the best at those things. Maybe not the best, but I definitely had that feeling of like, I should be doing these things. Because, it's a craft that I care about. And so the time that I spent away from it was definitely my indicator of like, I have to do this or I will freaking die. Like, and if you feel that way about something, you just gotta do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what inspires like a lot of your poetry? Is there any one specific thing, or is it like a multitude of things?
It depends on the poem. I would say that I can look at a piece of poetry, like I can read a piece of my own poetry, because I don't even date the things that I write, which is probably not the best idea. But I can read a poem and be like, oh, I know who that's about, or I know what this situation is referring to. Mm-hmm. And so I can kind of time it in my life based on that. So I can definitely say my greatest inspiration is what's happening to me at any given time. But what it is that is my muse, or whoever it is my muse. It really just depends on what's happening, or if I've decided to do an assignment, or if I've decided that I will sit down and write about my best friend. I get determined like that.
It's like a very eloquent diary.
Yeah. Kinda, yeah. Absolutely.
And so, speaking of which, one of my favorite poems that I saw you had written, it says, "Next, after the struggle, the work is to prosper. It is one thing to understand suffering. It is another thing to understand joy." And in your experience, do you feel as though you've had to come to know that suffering in order to know and appreciate the joy?
Okay. I don't think I can answer that question, but I can tell you what inspired the poem.
Mm-hmm.
So in a lot of mythology, religions, spiritual beliefs, things like that, there's this idea of heaven and hell. And I would say even specifically Dante's Inferno. But there's also the second part of it, which is
Purgatory?
No.
Or Paradise?
Paradise, yeah. Paradiso, right? There's 7 layers of heaven and there's 7 layers of hell, right? There's this idea that they are interconnected somehow, but they all actually go to the same place. And the reason I wrote that poem is because oftentimes when you are struggling or when you are in a dark place, the instinct is to go deeper into the darkness, to go deeper into the heaviness, to go deeper into the suffering of things, which you absolutely can do, and you will find God that way. You will find like a spiritual kind of point where it's like, oh, this is it. This is the answer to the question. This is the balance point to what it is that I'm experiencing. And that's one way of experiencing kind of like nirvana or peace. But you can also do it through joy. You can explore those 7 layers of heaven, if you will, and also find that exact same conclusion. And that's what that piece was kind of putting into perspective, both for myself, because I need that reminder, right? I can suffer and I can focus on my suffering and I can break down my suffering and pull it apart, study each piece and really, really get into the nitty-gritty of my suffering, but I can do the same exact thing get the same exact result by studying my joy. And really figuring out what makes me happy and what brings me light and what makes me lighter and what helps me share light. So yeah, that poem essentially is about that idea that, you know, if you take your darkness, it multiplies. If you take your light, it multiplies. You can choose which one you want to multiply.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And so all of these performances you do and everything that you do, like for events and things, how does it feel for you to get to showcase your art to other people and really share what you're feeling to the world?
What I've always loved about it, and I've been a chronic oversharer since God knows when, you can ask any of my journalism professors, there's so many head shaking moments of like, Miranda, you should not be writing about this. But I love sharing those things because I know that I'm not alone. I know that there's someone else who's gone through what I've gone through, who is going through what I'm going through, who has the prospects of that happening to them on the horizon. And for me, sharing that is just my way of going, hey, it's like sending out that beacon. You're not alone, and I'm of your tribe. You can come to me if you have questions about it. You can come to me if you want to suffer through it with me. You can come to me if you want to, you know, learn from my mistakes and maybe skip this lesson. Or maybe not skip it, but, you know, go to a different one. Just learn a different lesson. Yeah, that's what it's really all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I actually also enjoy oversharing, and so, which makes me think, do you, because I know for me, I kind of see it as a way to, I'm very unashamed of my story, my past. How do you feel about that?
I used to be very ashamed,
Mm-hmm.
right, of where I came from, but at a certain point I realized that it made me into the person who I am. And if it weren't for the circumstances I grew up in, who knows what kind of person I could have become. And I super duper like me, and if I'm not ashamed of who I am, then I should be proud to share my story. So yeah, same thing.
And now, are there any mediums of art that you haven't explored that yet that you'd like to? You were talking about your comedies, your most recent one.
Yeah.
Is there anything up on the horizon that...
I'm probably going to get into screenwriting.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I want to write a film or like something episodic or something like that. I'd really like to make an anime series before I die. So I would be the one writing it. I cannot animate for the life of me. I can draw the best stick people. But I definitely don't have like the skill. I could get it, but man, there's so many people who are great at it. I would rather them do it. I'll handle the words for everything.
And in your life right now, what would you say is either the most important thing or at least just one of the most important things?
Important in what way, I guess? What way was going with that question?
Like, when you look at your life, is there any one specific thing or a few specific things where, like, this is what makes me the absolute happiest right now? This is what makes me feel like I have been reaching that inner peace.
I would say it's just connecting with the people around me.